I'm Em Montgomery, and today on my channel we are going to be doing a deep dive into the Atlantis attraction that never was. The attraction originally opened on June 14th, 1959, and it was one of Walt's favorite attractions in the park. It was also one of Disneyland's first attractions to require an e-ticket. If you're not familiar, basically at Disneyland, nowadays you would just buy a day pass and then you get to go on as many rides as you can stand in line for. But back then, you would have a booklet of tickets, A, B, C, D, and E, with a different amount of each of them, E being like the most valuable one. That would be like a Space Mountain or a Indiana Jones or like I guess any of the Star Wars rides today, you know, like the popular rides basically. And kids would like trade, you know, I'll give you like 2 B tickets if you give me 1 C ticket kind of thing. Like it was a whole thing. Okay. And so the submarines were, I don't know, it feels so weird to say now in 2021 the submarines were like a big deal attraction, but they were a big deal attraction at the time. Like that was huge in 1959. Walt saw it as this kind of continuation of, I guess you would say, continuation of technology, like the next progression of the glass bottom boat. And he thought that they were sick as fuck, basically. Like anytime people would be visiting Disneyland, like if there were foreign dignitaries or whatever, if there were like rich and famous people that Walt was touring around the park, he would always show off the subs and was very quick to mention that they were the 8th largest submarine fleet in the world. Initially, when Walt had this idea of bringing the glass bottom boats kind of to the next level, fully submerging guests underwater with them, the idea was to utilize actually real sea creatures. So you would be going into a lagoon with real fish, and I can't think of other types of sea creatures right now. Like, can you imagine how crazy that would be? Like, why did they ever think that would work? Like, how quickly would they get like sucked up into propeller or something? They don't have propellers on rides like that. It's on a track. I don't know. It doesn't seem safe though. Okay, I don't need to be an engineer to know that that doesn't sound safe. And guess what? They figured that out too. They were like, hey, this does not seem safe, so they scrapped that idea. So as far as the ride itself was concerned, it was on a track of over 1,300 feet long, and it would take guests through this lagoon. They would be going, I don't know why I rolled my eyes. That was such an asshole move. It would take us through this lagoon where they would see mermaids and coral reefs, rock formations. They would see caves. There was a graveyard of lost ships. And there was an encounter with a giant squid. You would travel underneath the North Pole, and you would see Atlantis. Put a pin in that for later, okay? Okay. So these submarines were incredibly pricey. They cost about $80,000 each to build. I did not do the math on the conversion for that. So in today's money, that's a lot. Guests would travel underneath the North Pole. They would reach depths of the ocean where light could not reach and no human had ever been before. They would even like pass by animatronic underwater mermaids in addition to the real life humans playing them up above. And they would travel to the lost city of Atlantis, put a pin in that one. And the whole attraction would end and culminate in this kind of like anticlimactic battle with a sea serpent. They say battle, but it ended, like, you can't scare the kids too badly, you know? It ended on a note of things being fine, and it was a narrowly missed encounter kind of battle, you know? It's Disneyland. It was kid friendly. Okay, also, not to be like that person, but technically they're not even submarines. To be actually classified as a submarine, you have to be able to submerge fully underwater. And we'll call them the ride vehicles. The ride vehicles actually never get fully submerged. It's an optical illusion for the guests. What the fuck? What was that? It's an optical illusion for the guests? That is a pretty cool feat of Disney Imagineering. They utilize lots of bubbles, lots of bubbles at different angles to make you feel like you're going down much farther than you actually are. So the lagoon that housed this attraction took 9 million gallons of water to fill. So not only is that like probably bigger than maybe what you were picturing. I don't know what you were picturing, but 9 million gallons is massive. It was also incredibly costly to maintain. You know, with other attractions, if you're talking about like, I don't know, Snow White's Scary Adventure or whatever, you can walk the track to check on the animatronics. I was actually on the Snow White ride once when it broke down, and we had to walk past all of the Evil Queen animatronics. I'm a grown-ass adult and I closed my eyes. It was scarier with the lights on, let me tell you. But I digress. Basically, you couldn't do that with Submarine Voyage because they were underwater. So they had to get a diver who would essentially be, I don't know, did they do diving certification back then? It was somebody who operated both as a diver and I guess a maintenance person who would have to go and check on the animatronics and everything underwater, which doesn't sound cheap. During the summers of 1959 through 1967, Disney actually hired real performers, like real flesh and blood human people, to play mermaids. And they would have them sitting in the lagoon, sunbathing on rocks or, you know, splashing each other. What's it called? Not water aerobics. Synchronized swimming. So they would do synchronized swimming and stunts and everything. And this caused problems for a number of reasons. They were out in the hot Southern California sun. If you've never been here before, it gets absurdly hot in the summer here. And they actually started complaining of some health issues. A lot of the women were experiencing issues related to the diesel exhaust fumes coming from the ride vehicles. So that's gonna be a problem, and a pricey one at that. And then on a less serious note, but what was still considered to be a problem, there was literally traffic jams, like pedestrian traffic jams in front of the lagoon because people would slow down, stop to look at them, you know, to watch the mermaids and everything, take pictures or whatever. And that little area, if you're familiar with the park, it's kind of like between Tomorrowland and where the Matterhorn wraps around. They said that you just like could not walk through it. So that became a problem too. They were only paid $1.65 an hour, which obviously sounds like nothing now, but it was also nothing then because adjusting for inflation, it's about $15.48 in 2021, which is basically minimum wage here in California. So they were getting paid minimum wage to get sunburned on a rock while breathing in diesel fumes and having their picture taken the whole time in a bikini top. Oh, and the water was so chlorinated that was a problem for them too. Like, what wasn't a problem for the mermaids? They had a rough go of it, I'm telling you. Fast forward past Walt's era, and we make our way into the 1990s. In 1998, park executives announced that the Submarine Voyage attraction was set to close. They deemed it too expensive to operate in relation to its capacity. Okay, so a lot was going on at Disney in the 1990s. And before we get any further, There's a couple names that are going to come up over and over again in this video, so I'm going to give you kind of like a rundown on the who's who of it all, okay? Honestly, Disneyland in the mid to late 1990s is kind of like Game of Thrones-esque. I don't know how else to describe it, but it's a lot of alleged. I'm just going to say that all the time. It's a lot of alleged backstabbing, you know, forming of alliances, betraying someone, not holding your promises. Like, it was a whole thing. First, we have Michael Eisner, chairman and CEO of the Walt Disney Company between 1984 and 2005. Also a major player is Frank Wells, who was president of the Walt Disney Company from 1984 to 1994. We have Jeffrey Katzenberg, who was the chairman of Disney Studios, also from the years 1984 to 1994. Interesting. I wonder what happened there. And finally, the last person that's going to play a major role in what we're talking about today is going to be Paul Pressler. In 1994, Pressler was Disneyland's head executive, and then he was promoted to be president of Walt Disney Attractions in 1998, which is when the bulk of shit goes down in the story. I just realized, based on like the lighting in here, this like barely looks like anything. In person though, we're just gonna do a little more of that. There we go. I look like I have a face. Okay, so the drama of the 90s at Disneyland. Things were exceptionally bad in 1994. In 1994, unfortunately, Frank Wells passed away in a tragic helicopter crash. This was obviously very sudden and completely unexpected, both to his family, friends, and obviously his coworkers. In particular, it really hit Michael Eisner hard, I think. Judging from what I've read, at least. They had worked together for 10 years, and I think it really strongly affected him. That being said, here's where we get into some Game of Thrones-y shit, right? Allegedly, Katzenberg said that Eisner had promised if Frank Wells, you know, ever left his position, and I know he didn't think it would happen this way, but if Frank Wells ever left his position, that Eisner would give his role to Katzenberg. And they had worked together for years and years and years. They'd worked together for like 10 years at this point, right? And Katzenberg kind of had that like always a bridesmaid, never a bride vibe to him, you know? I feel kind of bad reading about it. It kind of sounds like the same dynamic of someone having an affair where they tell you they're going to leave their wife and, oh, it didn't happen now. It wasn't the right time. I'm going to leave them in the future. I'm still going to leave. They're just leading you on, you know? I don't know why I used that example, but somebody just leading you on forever without actually following through. And that's exactly what happened here. Instead of promoting Katzenberg to Frank Wells' former role, Michael Eisner did a bit of a curveball move and promoted Paul Pressler, who at the time worked overseeing the Disney stores. He had a background in like overseeing retail locations. And Katzenberg was like, dude, I've worked with you for 10 years. I'm ready for this job. I know I am. This is a slap in the face, honestly. This is insulting to me. I'm gonna give you a chance to like fix this. Come on, dude. The dynamic between them totally changed. And Eisner was super firm in his decision, and it was like a big blowout thing. And so Katzenberg straight up just left and went on to form a production company with his friends. DreamWorks SKG is Steven Spielberg, Jeffrey Katzenberg, and David Geffen. SKG, get it? Which also, a lot of people speculate that Katzenberg knew due to his connections at Disney, certain things that may or may not have been in the works, for instance, for A Bug's Life. Total detour here, but John Lasseter had said that he had, in confidence, just spoken to Katzenberg as a friend and a colleague about A Bug's Life, and then later heard, oh, DreamWorks is doing a movie called Ants? Isn't that interesting? I mean, I'm not saying it. Shit hits the fan and things are not going well at Disneyland, right? They're experiencing a decline in like a lot of ways. Pressler was a big fan of using very strict cost-cutting measures to try and save some money in the park. But while he was making these changes, yes, the park was profitable technically, but average guest happiness and attendance were both declining. Some of the things that he did to cut costs included having employees wash their own, technically their costumes, you know? They're like the uniform you wear at work, but they're costumes. And former cast member here, you pick them up in like a big warehouse that just has rows and rows of them, and you look for your size, and then you drop them off, and it's like a big laundry system, you know? So you can have multiples out at one time, but you don't have to wash them yourself. And you don't have like one set that you use forever either, kind of thing. He also reduced cast member training and closed shows and attractions early, in addition to trying to end a program that gave discounts for disabled individuals visiting the park. Really? Like, of all the places to cut costs, really? I just think that speaks volumes. I'm sorry. I really do. I think that speaks volumes about who you are as a person, if that's what you're willing to do to save money. So things were not going super well financially at the time. And one of the ways that they intended to address this was to close a bunch of attractions. Pressler also was the one who basically, I don't know what you would say, invoked, demanded. It all sounds very strong, but like, I don't know, whatever. Pressler was the one who announced that it was going to be a 1-for-1 deal from then on out. If you want a new attraction in the park, you have to take one away, which is a good method for like clothes, you know? If you're someone who's trying not to go overboard spending on like shoes or dresses or whatever, sure, that's a good way to do it. But for a theme park, come on, dude. I don't know how he thought that was a good idea, especially at a time when public, I don't want to say perception, but like guest happiness is on the decline, and they are not happy about like beloved classic attractions being shut down. So things aren't looking too hot for Disney right now. As a bunch of, I guess you could say its peers, as a bunch of its peers got closed down in the 1990s, the subs actually kind of caught a lucky break, and they were spared from removal because they attempted to do something called New Tomorrowland, which I remember being so hyped for at the time. When they announced that, I was like, that's going to be so sick. That's going to be amazing. It's going to make Tomorrowland cool. It did not. Basically, the Imagineers who had been working on Euro Disney, known at the time, now we would call it Disneyland Paris, they really fell in love with that like Jules Verne kind of aesthetic vibe that they had come up with for a lot of stuff abroad. And so they felt inspired to bring that to California and to update Tomorrowland with the kind of like inspiration that they were feeling from working on Disneyland Paris. I can tell that I'm stalling because I don't know what eye makeup I'm gonna do. Do you ever do that where you're like, you can tell that you're really putting something off? I don't know. I feel like we're talking about Atlantis. We gotta go blue, right? Let's go blue. We'll try. If it looks bad, this is my first video. Don't be mean to me. I will cry. So, the idea for New Tomorrowland was happening in 1992. So I'm skipping back a little bit. So here was the problem. A lot of the attractions that they were going to be renovating as part of New Tomorrowland were a lot of the popular attractions. Mission to Mars, the rocket jets, Captain EO, even Space Mountain was gonna have to be shut down for a really long time. And they were closing down so much of Tomorrowland to, you know, make this big update happen that they kind of at least had the sense to know if they didn't have any working attractions left in that land, it was going to be bad news bears. So they were basically like, okay, subs, you can stay, but only because we have nobody else. Like, great for their self-esteem. But, okay, it means that the subs have survived another night in the Hunger Games. So they basically thought that, you know, once the New Tomorrowland opened, you know, that it was going to be a huge hit, and then they would be able to similarly update the attractions that had been kept open while they were renovating Mission to Mars, Space Mountain, etc., etc. That was the idea, at least. So it was like Autopia, little subby wubbies. There were other attractions that were going to get a nice little refresh. And then of course, New Tomorrowland did not go well. We talked a little bit about how Pressler was doing all of these cost-cutting measures in 1994, right? That's because when Euro Disney opened, Euro Disney was like Michael Eisner's baby, by the way. It was his park that he was overseeing from start to finish, which he'd never gotten to do before. And I think in a weird way, like do I need to say allegedly for this? I don't know. This is my opinion. Don't sue me, Michael Eisner. I think in a lot of ways, he kind of saw himself like walking in Walt's footsteps and wanted to be seen as Walt's successor. Like he even did when they would do like the TV show that Walt used to do, and he used to talk directly to people and he would show updates what was going on at Disneyland and everything. And Michael Eisner insisted on doing that as well, even though he was like super awkward and stiff in front of the camera and didn't really click with audiences the way Walt had. Okay, I know this is looking all kinds of messed up right now, but I just need you to trust me, okay? I need you to trust that we can take this look somewhere. And then I need to trust that I can take this look somewhere. Okay, it's getting better. It's getting better. So Disneyland Paris was a big old failure. A $3 billion in debt failure. There are so many things that I would love to make videos about that all got either canceled or dramatically reduced, literally just because of Euro Disney and how spectacularly it failed. Like, it's hard to picture what the parks would look like today if either they hadn't done Euro Disney or if it had been successful. Like, there's a lot that we could have had, y'all. Just saying. If you're unfamiliar, WDI they're the Walt Disney Imagineers, and they are responsible for like designing and bringing to life the park's attractions. And they had previously been given not like complete free reign, but you know, Eisner knew the value of the parks and he supported the Imagineers and what they were doing and kind of gave them a little more leeway. And then all of that stopped when they had to introduce cost-cutting measures with Paul Pressler. The Imagineers did not like Pressler. Also, sorry if you're an Imagineer watching this and you're like, I liked him. I don't know, it's what everyone says. Maybe you're the one Imagineer that liked him. But largely, it seems like they didn't like him. And this led to what almost feels like a little bit like a college prank war that you would see in the movies, except only one side was doing the pranks and the other side was like drastically reducing their budget for their livelihoods and their hopes and dreams. Okay, so we're going time-wise to 1998 now. I'm sorry, I know we're jumping around a lot. I will do better in the future. And basically, they were trying to figure out if they're going to retheme attractions, it had to be on the cheap, and it had to be something, you know, Michael Eisner loved this like movie to parks pipeline. He was all about it. He wanted to have attractions in the park for the films that they were putting out. And then you'll notice like the Disney Renaissance, as it's called, was this massive kind of breakthrough success for Disney. But it was followed by this like, not massive drop off, but definitely a decline with films like Pocahontas, Mulan, and Hercules underperforming. I'm not saying they're not good movies or that like they didn't turn a profit or anything like that, but just in terms of how massive Disney wanted them to be, it disappointed. Can I say money grubbing? Little greedy Disney. It disappointed them. And you'll notice that none of those films have attractions too, by the way. They had done an update on the Swiss Family Robinson Treehouse, which if you're just like a casual enjoyer of the park, you might not ever know that that was there. And they very cheaply, in the grand scheme of things, rethemed it to be Tarzan's treehouse, which allowed them to, you know, incorporate something new into the park. It was something that related to the film, and they were doing it on the cheap. So feels like it has all the makings of something that's gonna make Eisner happy, right? They're looking at the subs and they're like, we need to retheme this. What are we going to retheme this to, you know, be, I guess? What are we gonna retheme this to be? And then it's like this perfect solution. It's almost like a Deus Ex Machina a little bit. They were like, what can we do to retheme it? And then, bam! Atlantis: The Lost Empire was scheduled for release in 2001, which is a time that, you know, like timing that would work well for them with their schedule. And not only that, it has sequences, like organically has sequences set in and devoted to submarines in the film. And the existing Submarine Voyage already had a scene where it went to Atlantis. So they were like, oh my God, talk about meant to be. Amazing. I know that we know now today that Atlantis did not perform as well as Disney wanted it to. Where is my concealer? I feel like it's a little bit more common knowledge today, you know? We're all pretty aware Atlantis was not like this big breakthrough hit like Disney wanted it to be. But at the time, they were like, oh my God, this is going to be the thing that lets us move away from like these Broadway style, big sweeping epic musicals. And this is how we're going to be able to get into making like more action adventure films. And this was something that really excited them. They didn't want to just be making the same type of movie forever. And Atlantis, they felt, was going to be this like blockbuster spectacle that was going to put them on a path to expand further content in that direction, like Treasure Planet. Okay, I think we're fixing this. We're getting there. The idea was, you know, everyone would be happy with this setup, like the fans wouldn't lose the submarines. They wouldn't just be shutting them down for good or whatever. Pressler would be happy because he would be getting huge merchandise sales, in theory. Eisner would be happy because of that sweet, sweet vertical integration. And the Imagineers would be happy because they didn't want the subs to go away either, you know? This was a ride that was beloved by many. In April of 1998, a Disneyland PR person, whose job I do not envy, made a statement saying that there were currently no plans to shut down the subs because people were seeing that they had been, you know, sitting there defunct since 1998. It's already 1998. Never mind. We jumped forward in time. Ignore me. And then, of course, the subs shut down in 1998. Of course. So, Pressler, always the people's favorite. What I assume, obviously I wasn't there, I don't know, but what I assume is in a bid to buy himself some goodwill and some kind of like community trust and patience as he stepped into this new role and was making a ton of cutbacks and making a lot of people hate him and everything he was doing to the parks. He promised that he would have the subs back up and running, you know, one way or another, in 5 years, by 2003. That was his promise that he publicly made. Going back to WDI and their super fun relationship they had with Pressler, who they like just love him. May of 1998, they got a little rebellious. Just a little bit rebellious. And the Imagineers, while park management was like giving a speech and otherwise occupied essentially, Imagineers not only put up a flag at the Lagoon where the subs were housed that had an A, an Atlantean A, like the one you see in marketing and promotional materials for the movie. They also had draped this, like, I don't know what you'd call it, like a cover. There was like a cover or a tarp that goes over an area where the subs are held. And Imagineers put up a banner, giant banner, that said Atlantis Expedition Imagineer Preparation Base. I actually saw that when I was a kid. I remember seeing that and being like, finally, oh my God, great. Because I was so excited. I was so excited for the movie Atlantis. I was so excited for the subs to finally be something because I was too young. I don't know if I went on them when I was a kid, but before they closed in 1998, I would have been young enough that I wouldn't remember, you know? And to a kid, it's like, oh my God, that sounds like the coolest ride ever. And so I was excited and other people were excited. Park management, not so much. This was May 15th, which is a week before New Tomorrowland was set to open. Sorry, I know I've been jumping around in time a lot, but basically, like, this was a big, important time for park management, and Imagineers just were like, hey, what if we give you the middle finger, and we do it in front of the guests, and we do it in a way that, what would the word be? I don't want to say pressures, but it's kind of pressuring them into following through on that promise of doing something with the subs, because it's like, well, you promised the people you would do something, and it looks like you've made good on that promise because that banner is up saying that make room for the Atlantis expedition. You know, checkmate, your move, Pressler, basically was what was happening, you know? And yeah, I'm sure that conversation went over well when they discovered it and talked to the Imagineer. I'm just so baffled at how different this looks on camera than in person. I really hope that my face right now is like the before in an HGTV before and after when they like renovate someone's home and you look at it and you're like, oh my God, I can't even believe that's the same house. I hope we feel that way about my eye makeup by the time we're done with this video. So in addition to the flag and the banner, if you thought they were going to stop there, you have a lot to learn about the Imagineers. Imagineering artist Jason Shipley basically commissioned this sort of like replica of what the attraction posters, the vintage ones, look like when you are walking through to the entrance to the park. They're really cool. I'm actually a really big fan of the style and like the art style for them. I love them a lot. And he commissioned one in that style that said Atlantean Encounter, and then put them up around the lagoon. The tagline was, "Don't waste your air screaming." Yeah. Starting to sound like kind of a different attraction than it was previously, right? Starting to sound maybe like a little bit more mature, maybe a little bit less kid-friendly. There's a reason for that. Oh, there's a reason for that. A lot happened over the course of the next 2 years. 1999 saw the invention and introduction of the Fastpass system, which was something that Pressler was really proud of at the time. They thought that it was going to be this kind of like Hail Mary thing for the park, because what Pressler was imagining was people would not be complaining about, you know, long wait times for their favorite rides, like the big e-ticket attractions. They would come up, you know, get a fast pass, get a return window of time when they should come back, and then they would be able to get in a shorter line to ride the attraction. And in his mind, the guests, now with some free time on their hands, would shop, would go to one of the restaurants, maybe get some popcorn, a snack, an ice cream, a drink, whatever. Do you ever have moments where like you realize how out of touch people are when it comes to like their customers or their consumers or whatever? Like, I don't know what his wealth was like at the time, but he sounds like a rich ass guy in comparison to, like, how can you not know? People are just gonna ride other rides, right? Like, if there's a fast pass for Indiana Jones, okay, you ride the Jungle Cruise. You walk a little and you ride Pirates of the Caribbean. You ride Haunted Mansion. Like, I wouldn't be like, ho hum, this money in my pocket sure is, you know, ooh, it's burning a hole in my pocket. Let me see if I can spend it at one of Disney's finest shopping locations. That's such a like corporate mindset of treating people like consumers and not like human beings who have already spent an obscene amount of money to be at your theme park, you know? That obviously ended up causing more problems than Pressler anticipated, because guess what happened? Oh my God, it's the thing I just described to you. Exactly. So even though Fastpass was, it kind of seems like a mixed bag of success, right? Like, it did some things very well, and then others, it just made worse. And so Pressler is kind of, I think at this point, he's almost like panicking and like reaching and trying to see what he can do to make the improvements that need to be made so he doesn't get fired. I don't know. It's a lot of pressure on Pressler, you know? In the year 2000, the Lagoon got a bit of a cleanup. Before like actually committing to doing anything with it, they had to check and see like what the structure was like, if it was going to be at all reusable, or if they were going to have to rebuild entirely for a new attraction. And luckily, I mean, it passed and it was still in good enough condition that they would be able to just repurpose what was there for Atlantean Encounter. I don't know when this became like a graphic linery kind of look. I don't know what's going on there, but I think it's better than what we've been doing so far, so I'm gonna stick with it. By like May or like summer 2000, it's unfortunately kind of clear that even though New Tomorrowland you know, did bring in new people right at the time when it first opened. Only 2 years later, Tomorrowland attendance had actually declined overall. So that's not only like, oh, my project wasn't as successful as I hoped. It's like, oh, it's making things worse. This is not good. So TikTok, you know, time is marching onward and Pressler is presumably sweating. There were even more financial problems at the park and with Tomorrowland in particular, as the like new e-ticket attraction that was supposed to be this like cornerstone and crown jewel of New Tomorrowland, the rocket rods, was not just a financial failure, it was also a failure in terms of like overall guest reception. Just to like give you an idea of how much Pressler was doing to like directly negatively impact the parks. On average, the cost of building an e-ticket attraction is about $100 million. $100 million. Pressler gave Imagineers a $50 million budget, 25 million of which would be coming directly from Disney, and the other 25 to be provided with a sponsorship from General Motors. So already we're working with a budget that's half of what it normally is. And this is supposed to be the big new Space Mountain, Big Thunder Mountain, lots of the mountains, you know, it's supposed to be the big new ride. And then General Motors backed out of the deal, and Pressler went, I guess you don't get your extra 25 million then. And he had them make a $100 million attraction on a $25 million budget. Even if you're not somebody who's like a massive theme park fan and you're like, whatever, it's a ride, who cares? So it doesn't look as fancy. Think about safety. Think about how many corners they had to cut. This ride broke down constantly. It was almost like a running joke, but not in a fun way, that you kind of always expected it to be closed. And you were more surprised if you went to the rocket rods and they were open rather than being surprised by them being closed, you know? And when I was a kid and I could ride them, I loved them, but I was a kid, I had shitty taste, you know? I've heard that they weren't actually very fun or good or a smooth ride at all. They were repurposing an existing track. They weren't able to make the changes they wanted to make to it to make for a like smooth ride. And it showed. After the closure of the rocket rods, because they got closed really fast, that's how bad they were, they doubled down on being like, okay, we got to get some of that stuff that we closed previously back open. Like, this is clearly not working and the numbers prove it. So let's just admit defeat and kind of like move on and try and get the attractions that we think are going to click with people back. And one of those was Submarine Voyage. Now, Pressler said, I feel like so many of these things start with Pressler said, Pressler promised. Dude, just stop promising things. You never fulfill them. Stop doing it. But anyway, he said guaranteed that these attractions would be open by summer of 2001. That's the next year. That's the following summer, which also just goes to show you how quickly Rocket Rods was shut down. It was barely around for a while. Anyway, so he's giving them like a year's time to bring these attractions to life. And even though we're only focusing on Submarine Voyage today, there were other attractions that they were doing this to. It's just, we're focusing on Atlantis, okay? Here's the problem. Pressler was like, look, we can tide over until the summer of 2001 because we're about to open a second gate for another park just right across the way. Disney's California Adventure. Oh my God, it's gonna be amazing. People are gonna love it. The whole idea behind California Adventure was when people would come to vacation here, they would make Disneyland just one of their stops. And then they wanted to do other things in California, go visit Hollywood, I don't know, see the Redwoods, San Francisco, whatever. And Disney, being Disney, was like, what if we just built something that offered them the best of every place that they could leave us to go to? And then instead, they won't leave. And they'll just do their entire vacation here and feel like they saw all of California and giving us all of their money in the process. Smart guys these executives were. So he was like, don't worry. Don't worry. I got this. We're going to be fine. California Adventure is going to get us through this. All right. We're all going to coast off of California Adventure and its massive success. And then, you know, we'll deal with this when we're ready to deal with this. Who's going to tell him? Not me. If you're unfamiliar, California Adventure was a massive flop, both financially and just like critically. And what would you call it if it's by guests? I don't know. Guests, critics, and in terms of just like money, everything about it was a failure. I remember going and even being a kid being like, where are the rides? What is there to do? We did like 2 things and it's like, oh, you're done now. Great. This was really fun. I'm glad that we're not at Disneyland right now. And it just threw that option out the window for them. It was like, he kept saying, a lifeboat is coming. A lifeboat is coming. And instead, like a tidal wave came and knocked them over. That got really dark. I'm sorry. At this point, my makeup's looking ridiculous. Guests are really unhappy. And they're just like, oh my God, how do we dig ourselves out of this hole? And they said that the subs would be reopened 2002, 2003 at the absolute latest. We swear. That's like the latest it could possibly happen. Sure, Jan. This was an animated film with a $100 million budget. Like, Disney went all out making this movie, and genuinely, like, I almost think it's kind of sad. Like, they were so sure they had a hit on their hands. They really, really were like, this is gonna be it for us. It's ushering in a new era of Disney. And I know that they're like a massive corporation. When I say it makes me sad, I'm more of talking about like for the artists who spent years working on it tirelessly for way less money than they deserve, and then the final project doesn't even like get the level of acclaim that would match the amount of work you put into it. You know what I mean? I can't imagine spending that many years of my life working for a company like that and then it like massively underperforms. I don't know. The whole thing just kind of makes me sad. And here's the thing. There's a lot of ways that you can speculate about like, well, why did this happen in the first place? Like, why wasn't Atlantis successful? And Atlantis is a bit of a cult classic. I know a lot of people who it's like their favorite Disney movie, or it's up there with one of their favorite Disney movies. But in terms of, this is all subjective, by the way. Subjective. Like what you like. Your opinion is valid. Art is art. There's no like one defining opinion. That being said, in terms of speculation about like, well, why didn't this film do as well? Why didn't it get even like as good of a critical reception? Because, you know, sometimes with movies, you're like, oh, the critics loved it, but we just couldn't get audiences to see it. But Atlantis really wasn't successful in like either of those ways. And unfortunately, this is something that I just find so cosmic and like such a full circle moment. One of the reasons why it's speculated that it wasn't kind of like up to par with this like Renaissance era Disney stuff, you know, Little Mermaid, Beauty and the Beast, Aladdin, Lion King, etc., was because there had been a massive amount of artists leaving Disney. Disney had had a monopoly for so long, so long. It was like the place to be if you wanted to be working in animation. When Katzenberg left and co-founded DreamWorks SKG, there were suddenly more options out there. And artists started leaving. The talent pool that Disney was drawing from was shrinking by the day, and they didn't have the exact same team at their disposal that they had had for previously successful films. Not to say that the people remaining weren't amazing and great at what they do, but, you know, it's shaking things up in a overall negative way. And interesting how it primarily stems from, Katzenberg leaving. And why did that happen, Michael? Michael? Why did it happen? Mm-hmm. So anyway, they had planned like a direct-to-video sequel. They'd planned a TV show, several video games. Like, they were ready to make Atlantis a big-ass thing. And then it failed, and they kind of just went, oh, no. Oh, no. And they just pulled back on a lot of that stuff. There's still the direct-to-video sequel, but like the TV show's not around, etc., etc. So I'm sure it's not hard to connect the dots at this point, and I'm sure you can start to see why this wasn't going to happen and the subs weren't going to get rethemed. You know, we all see where this is headed. But before we kind of conclude with that, I want to take a minute to walk you through what allegedly their pitch for this attraction was. Like, what would Atlantean Encounter have actually looked like? Well, if you are a Disney buff at all, the name Atlantean Encounter might remind you of the name of another attraction that also existed around this time. If you know it, write it in the comments now before I say it, and then you can brag later, okay? I'll give you a second. Okay. I feel like you would have done it by now. Alien Encounter. The alien themed experience that was at Walt Disney World in Orlando, Florida. This was part of Michael Eisner's push to essentially make the parks more enticing to teens. He wanted, like, he brought his son to Disney and his son was bored. And that was apparently this big wake up call to him where he was like, oh no, we can't have that. We must capture the interest of the teens. Like, I feel like if this were happening today, he would be talking about, like, we must have characters teaching TikTok dances for the youth. You know what I mean? Like, it just feels very, how do you do, fellow kids? But I digress. Anyway, so Michael Eisner wants to make some more mature attractions. And long story short, this culminated in the existence of an attraction based off of the movie Alien. And if you're thinking to yourself, I didn't know there was more than one movie named Alien, because it can't possibly be the one starring Sigourney Weaver, where a xenomorph alien kills an entire crew of people and a chest burster breaks free of John Hurt's chest in the middle of a dinner scene. Spoilers, sorry. Yeah, it's that Alien. It's that Alien. Apparently that attraction, like, terrified people. If you're somebody who got to see it in person, please let me know how you felt about it, because it's one of those attractions where I'm like, I hate that I'll never be able to experience it. It's just one of the few where I'm like, damn, you know? Anyway, Imagineers really, really liked Alien Encounter, and they had wanted to be able to bring it to the West Coast, but after seeing how scary it was and like what the public's reaction was to it, that answer was a big ol' hell no. They were like, absolutely not. You are not making one of these at Disneyland. The Imagineers were like, well, maybe what we can do is just take the essence of what makes that attraction so cool and have it in something else in the park. And to them, a small enclosed space like a submarine being submerged in water, the possibility of, you know, squid attacks and other dark encounters in the water was something that they felt they could utilize, you know, this claustrophobic element, the darkness of it, to make it a more mature, kind of more intense ride, you know? And that's why, allegedly, I wasn't there, I don't know, but this is what I read, why it was called Atlantean Encounter. Normally I do freckles because I have little freckles on my skin that you can just never see. I put foundation over it, and especially over my nose, and I always miss them once I do foundation. I feel like it's not really gonna go with this today. Can I say glitter freckles? Would glitter freckles be okay? I don't even know what glitter freckles means. It's just an idea I had. I forgot what I was saying. This pitch that would kind of bring the essence of Alien Encounter to Disneyland was a lot. I'm not gonna lie, it sounds pretty intense. Reportedly, guests would load into these World War I era submarines and, you know, be submerged and travel through the graveyard of lost ships. I forgot what it was called for a second. The graveyard of lost ships, as seen in the movie. And there was reportedly an interactive element. I don't know about this part. When I was reading this, to me it sounds like this is from what they call the blue sky phase of the Imagineering process. When they're starting out, they try to not restrict themselves and don't consider, you know, plausibility or budget or whatever. Just sky's the limit. What do you want to make? And it's called, you know, blue sky. And this next part kind of sounds to me like it had to have been a blue sky idea that just wasn't, you know, they never made it far enough with this to have to scrap it, is what I would presume. But again, I was not there. I don't know. Just a woman on YouTube talking about a theme park while applying glue to tiny eyelashes. I feel like I'm painting. There's more than one account of how this part of the attraction would work, but basically there would be a portion that would be interactive. There would be like movable sort of arms of the sub, holding baskets, I guess, that you could kind of like scoop up things from the ocean floor that were like treasure, I guess. I don't know. It seems a little unclear to me. And there were two things that apparently were said about what would happen to them. One was that you would be able to keep whatever you pick up in your little basket thing. And that's why to me, I'm like, there's no way. This has to be a blue sky idea. Can you imagine Disney being like, keep all the fake gold and gems you can carry? They sell those in the Pirates of the Caribbean gift shop. They would not give them away for free. But I digress. The other option sounds slightly more plausible to me until the end, which is that when you go through the final kind of climactic battle sequence of the ride, in the sort of like in the battle, in amidst all the action, I guess you could say, basically the sub would be jostled and it would drop whatever you had managed to catch. I think that makes a lot more sense. Up until this point, I read that then when you exit as like a consolation prize, a cast member was going to disperse like a single Atlantean coin to each guest. Again, Disney just doesn't do free. The closest I can think of like getting something free for a ride is your little like paper license that you would get from Autopia. And even that's just like the world's flimsiest tiny piece of paper that's like business card size. Also, I can't do my lashes in front of people. Don't look when I do them, okay? Don't look. We're gonna talk about a little bit more of the attraction itself because it actually sounds like it would have been really cool. It would kind of start like like any disaster ride would, I'm guessing. The lights would start to go out. The Leviathan I guess the Leviathan was like the big baddie, would be like attempting to grab the submarine and kind of like trying to crush it inward. Like, I guess like we would crush a soda can or something. And, you know, it would be Imagineering magic, making those effects come together. So guests would feel like it was really happening. It would sort of be like a chase with the Leviathan, like you're trying to get away. Obviously, the Leviathan doesn't want that to happen. And you would go through a tunnel and, you know, there would be effects to make you feel like the Leviathan's following you. But what I think is interesting about this is, whereas up until now, it had been like all practical stuff, reportedly, this is when they would make use of like screens, not looking at real life stuff in front of them, but like things that would be projected onto the portholes, which a higher tech version of that exists now. And I think it's just really interesting that they were thinking about doing that at the time, but I digress. The attraction would wind down to a close with the Leviathan giving one final burst of electricity, so you would have like cool lighting effects inside the sub. It would be a huge spectacle, and then there would be a volcanic eruption, which would tie into another attraction that they had wanted to build. This video would be way too long if I talked about it all, but let me know if you want to hear about that, because that one never happened. And you'd be returned to the surface. Who knows what would happen with that treasure you caught? I don't know, but that sounds like amazing. That ride sounds fantastic. I'm genuinely so frustrated that we didn't get it. There's a couple attractions that over the years I've been really frustrated that don't exist, and this is definitely one of them. Unfortunately, it was still a tough time at Disney around this time, and Pressler left in 2002. Great, we love to see it. But by 2003, nothing had been done with the subs, and they basically got like an estimate of how much it would cost to have them up and running by the target date they were trying to hit, and it would have been $10 million, which the park was not doing well at the time. California Adventure was not doing well. Guests were not happy. Atlantis hadn't done well. Like, there was a lot of reasons against it, basically. Legendary Imagineer Tony Baxter reportedly led the charge of a sort of save our subs kind of campaign, really being vocal about not wanting them to go away. And in 2003, with the massive success of Finding Nemo, I'm sure you can put two and two together, it became a Finding Nemo attraction instead of our potential beloved Atlantean encounter. Here's my thing about Finding Nemo's submarine ride. Finding Nemo is a great movie, don't get me wrong. I love it very, very much. But it can, and it has been, an attraction in so many other forms, right? We've seen it as an interactive show. We've seen a roller coaster. We've seen more of a traditional dark ride. We've seen a lot of different ways to bring Finding Nemo to life in the parks. From my perspective, Finding Nemo could really fit in anywhere. You know, you could use any kind of concept, as I just said, to add Nemo to the parks. But you can't put anything in the lagoon and make it work with the subs. The way I kind of think of it is like, you know how not all rectangles are squares, but all squares are rectangles? Kind of feels like that to me. Nemo could have gone anywhere. And I think that the subs, I don't know, I just wanted to see the subs be something really unique and really special. And it's a perfectly fine ride. It's cute. If you haven't done it, like, it's fine. But I think it could have been something truly iconic. And I think it could have been something very unique and one of a kind. The fact that it didn't happen and that there's such a long history as to why it didn't happen. You know, I was talking to people about it, and I was saying, oh, I'm going to make this video on why we never got an Atlantis attraction. And every single person was like, oh, because the movie didn't do well. It's like, well, actually, as I'm sure you can attest to this now that you've heard me talk about it for forever, that's not actually the main reason why it didn't happen. It's a part of it for sure, but there was so much else going on at Disney at the time. There's so much, like, it feels weird to say like workplace politics, but that's what it is, you know? Like the politics of what was happening during Eisner's time and the failure of both Disneyland Paris and California Adventure, both massively impacted, you know, the possibility for this attraction to exist alongside so many others. There's so many attractions and lands that just never even got a chance because of the failure of these other parks. There was no budget, you know? Which sucks. It really, really sucks. Also, like, adding insult to injury. I'm gonna see if I can find a picture of this. If I do, I'll share it here. Because I saw this when I was a kid. Before they announced that Atlantean encounter wasn't happening, but when they knew that it wasn't happening, so the public didn't know, but management knew, they still did character meet and greets for Milo and Kita, the two leads in Atlantis: The Lost Empire. And where do you think that they hosted them? Right in front of the Lagoon. Could anything make it look more like it was going to become an Atlantis ride than having a giant Atlantis banner on it at one point, seeing posters up for it at one point, and then when the movie comes out, meeting the characters directly in front of it? Doesn't that just feel like adding insult to injury a little bit, you know? I don't know. I'm kind of curious. I mean, what do you think? If you've been on any version of this attraction, do you think it would have been a good fit to do an Atlantis, like, overhaul to it? Are you glad that it worked out the way it did and it's Finding Nemo now? I don't know. I really don't know what, like, the general public perception is, but I know how I feel, and it's sad. Anyway, thank you for joining me. This is not what I thought my makeup would look like by the end of this video, but I don't normally do makeup. I thought I would kind of start doing videos like this so I can practice makeup more. I just wanted to do something blue because it felt very, like, Atlantean, you know? I thought I should probably try to do something that kind of looked like the branding colors for the movie. Honestly, this is looking better than it did, like, midway through the video, so I told you I'd make something better out of it. If you liked what you saw today, feel free to subscribe because I'm going to be making more videos like this in the future, covering theme park history, you know, rides that never happened, movies that never got made, old Hollywood history. I was thinking maybe doing some urban legends too, but I don't know. And if you enjoyed this but you don't want to subscribe, then thank you for hanging out today. Thanks for stopping by. I appreciate it. I'm Em Montgomery, and I will be seeing you on the next one. Bye, friend.